I give you Molly O'Neill.
Thank you so much for that kind and overly generous introduction, Chris. And Victor, to you, I wish you were here. Last time I was here was 2019, right before COVID hit, and you always give the best hugs. So speedy recovery to you, and we miss you here tonight. And lastly, thanks to Gabrielle, who I know from work in juvenile court, for making me laugh with her prayer, non-prayer invocation. It's quite nice. So my hope tonight is to talk to you a little bit about my office. I am the public defender for the County of Santa Clara. I was appointed by the board as interim in 2012 and made permanent in 2013. But I have been in the office since 1990, so Chris was right. We've been at it together for a long time. So I want to talk about how public defense offices came to be. I want to talk some about ours and how we've changed and evolved over the last 20 years, 15 years, and why it matters and why you're even having me here tonight to talk about it. And after I am done, and I have a lot of materials, but it's Friday night, I get it. I'm gonna try to move through it and happy to take questions. But after I am done, Assistant Public Defender Damon Silver, who's dressed in the nice suit next to the Chief of Police, is going to talk to you about our race equity work, both in our office and within the county. And I apologize that I am not in as nice a suit as Damon is. I came from a graduation, and it's a hot Friday afternoon, so I figured you all would forgive me, and many of you have seen me in a suit before. So, haha, that sounded different from what I meant. So, public defense and public defenders' offices all grew out of this, the ideas of this visionary woman, Clara Foltz, who became the first woman lawyer in California. She was denied admission to the only law school in the state at the time, Hastings, and she sued them, and so then they let her in. After she graduated from, yeah, that's right, and after she graduated from law school, they wouldn't let her into the state bar to practice, which she had just spent years learning to do. So she helped rewrite legislation to change the language from white males can practice law in California to people can practice law in California, and she was then admitted to the bar and allowed to practice. And she was a big proponent of fairness and balance in the system. And somehow she worked many different legal jobs while raising 5 children over the course of her career, but including as a prosecutor. And as part of that, she envisioned that there ought to be governmental sponsored legal counsel for people who couldn't afford it, who were being prosecuted. And to that end, she gave a speech at the World's Fair in Chicago in 1893, and she loved her speech, but almost no one did anything with it. So, except when Clara, went to Los Angeles, where they founded the first public defender's office in 1914. It was the first one in California, and it was the only one for many, many years. The rest of the state didn't follow suit in establishing public defender's offices until the landmark case of Gideon versus Wainwright. Before I talk about Gideon, this is the Clara Foltz courthouse in LA. She was such an influential figure, they named an entire humongous courthouse after her. So this is Clarence Gideon. He was a drifter in Florida, and he was accused of stealing money from a pool hall, and not much money. He was arrested, prosecuted, and convicted, all without a lawyer. So he was then sentenced to 5 years in the state penitentiary in Florida, during which time he petitioned to the Florida State Court to send it back and let him have a lawyer. He had no legal training. He had no education, hardly at all. It wasn't much money. And the Florida Supreme Court said, nope, no luck. So then he petitioned to the U.S. Supreme Court. This is his handwritten letter asking them to reconsider the fairness of him being tried and convicted and sentenced with no lawyer. And here he got some relief. They agreed They sent his case back. It was retried with counsel this time, and he was acquitted. And because of the language in the U.S. Supreme Court case, public defender services became mandated, and after that, they sprung up all over California. They were, and all over the country, really. So our public defender office in 1965 was founded. Here's the first 11 people in the office, and now there are 34 counties in California with formal public defender offices, which cover about 93% of the population. Those other very, very small counties use contract services, and they clearly cannot provide the kind of level of service that foundational public defense offices can. Here's where we are today. We are roughly 303 employees, with a decline projected for next year because the county is cutting our budget some, but we are big compared to 1965, and we have roughly an $83 million budget going into next year. So when our office was founded in 1965, and when all those other offices were founded in the wake of Gideon, here's what we did. We appeared with our clients at their first court date, which is the arraignment. We advised them about what evidence we thought the prosecution had and possible outcomes. We advised them whether they should take the case to trial or resolve it through a plea bargain, and they would do one of those things. And then we would either take the acquittal, take the dismissal, or appear at sentencing, and that would be it for us. Here's what public defense offices traditionally had in the way of staff: lawyers, clerical staff, and investigators, and that's it. And that was the case for 50 years. In 2013, our office received a Department of Justice grant from the Bronx Defenders to provide us technical assistance to start to do holistic defense. So holistic defense sounds a little weird, but basically it's an idea that, and Chris alluded to it during his introduction, it treats the whole person. So rather than you stole a pack of meat from Safeway, you know, they got you on camera, that's it. It's like, why were you stealing the meat from Safeway? What drove you into the system? What are your other needs and issues? And what can we do to both understand those needs and help you get the services you need to address them, so that you can then get completely out of the system. And when we're able to do that, and it's a really good model, recidivism is reduced, money is saved, and families are reunited. People are off the streets. People are not drug addicted anymore. So we flew out to New York. Damon and I went together. They came out to us. They talked to us about what all we needed to do to kind of change our model of representation. And there was some resistance to it in the office initially, but it has spread all over California and the country, and it really is the right way to do the work that we do for the community and for our clients. So now that we, 11 years later, here's who we have on our staff. We now have social workers. We got one from the board several years back. We now have 6. We have interns. We have a big army of free labor, and it's good for them. They come in, and they're super excited to be doing some legal work, and they watch body-worn camera footage, of which there is a lot, as the chief knows, and it's really important to make sure that you watch it so you know what's happened on the case. We have a mental health team because, as you all know, so many people in our jails are mentally ill, and so many people on our streets are mentally ill, and they require a different kind of attention in the intersectionality of their criminal case and their mental illness. And recently, and Damon oversees this team, we have community outreach attorneys. Chris was the supervisor for the community prosecution team, and for a long time, there was no counterpart to them. And in the last 4 years, we've been able to add 3 of those attorneys, and they are out in homeless encampments with their computers, figuring out if people have court dates that they need to attend, recalling old bench warrants, like basically trying to make sure they don't go to jail through our work, meeting them where they live and where they are. We're also in the schools, predominantly on the east side, doing Know Your Rights trainings. We're called in sometimes to kind of de-escalate what might turn into a fight. We're trying to be where we're needed in the community and not just sitting in our office waiting for the business to come to us. So I would be remiss not to mention the immigration attorneys. So it's huge that we have 2 on-staff immigration attorneys. And back to the holistic model, one of the pillars of it is that you have to meet people's needs seamlessly in-house. So if we tell a client, call ILRC in San Francisco, and that lawyer knows nothing about their criminal case, we're never going to be able to give them the right kind of help to make sure there's an immigration-safe plea, that they get the advisement that they need. So we have 2 excellent, amazing immigration attorneys who all day long do Padilla consults to make Padilla versus Kentucky as a case that gives the right to clients to be advised accurately and well on the status of their immigration status in relation to their criminal case. So we're super proud of all of those things and the way that the office has grown. So in that same vein, and for equity reasons, excuse me, we're no longer just appearing at the first court date and stopping our representation at sentencing. We have a very innovative program called PAR, which is Pre-Arraignment Representation and Review, where we now see clients between the time they're arrested and the time they first go to court. We've never done that. No public defender office has ever done that until San Francisco started about 8 years ago. Santa Cruz is now doing it. But many, many jurisdictions, including LA and San Diego, have come to us to ask how they can follow that program. So we're very proud of that. Our community outreach attorneys, as I mentioned, that is new and very innovative, our immigration attorneys. And then post-conviction, which, like I said, we used to stop handling clients and cases and anything once sentencing happened, but there's been a cascade of criminal justice reforms in the last, really starting with realignment in 2011. So we do expungements, we do record clearances, which is hugely beneficial for people to get back in the workforce and sometime into housing. Those criminal records can really impact a person's ability to move forward. And I've listed several other types of post-conviction work we do. Most importantly, maybe now, is retroactive Racial Justice Act work. That we have roughly 3,000 clients in state prison from Santa Clara County, and they all deserve to have their cases reviewed to see whether Osh-Kalra's Racial Justice Act may apply to them in their cases. So that's kind of the way that we have expanded. I'm going to skip that slide because I talked some about that. So, okay, that's great, Molly, but why should we care about this and why does this matter? Well, because we play a critical role in preventing unnecessary and very, very expensive jail stays, incarceration. We work, and Gabrielle and I were together a long time and Chris too, on a prevention and programs work group to try to keep kids out of the school to prison pipeline, so we can we keep people out of the system altogether. We balance out the sometimes crushing weight of the authority and power that the prosecution has to make sure it's fair and it's balanced. And we call out race. I mean, nobody wants to have race called out, but we do that. We say this matters in this particular case, and here's why. And we build community trust, in part by being out with our community outreach attorneys in the schools, in the homeless encampments, and here tonight, I hope. And as far as the clients, here's what we do for the clients. We lend some dignity to them at a time that they are in huge crisis and maybe in jail. We explain the process to them. It's very, very confusing, especially when you're in crisis, to understand what's happening to you. We give clients their day in court, which they are constitutionally entitled to in the way that they want to see that played out. We investigate their cases, we develop mitigation, we interview witnesses, we tell their stories, we get their school records, we humanize the clients, and we explain, as I said, the evidence that the prosecution has against them and what that means in their case. And I just want to touch briefly on this slide, which shows you how much California spends on prosecution every year and how much it spends on public defense. It's 50% to the public defenders for every dollar that the prosecution gets, and that really matters. And certainly there are some areas where prosecution does some things that the public defenders don't do. Nonetheless, double the amount of money is too much, and it's not fair. So I just want to talk about a case that we handled that really kind of emphasizes and illustrates the importance of having a public defender. This man, unfortunately, was killed at his home in Monte Sereno and during a home invasion, and our client, Lucas Anderson, spelled L-U-K-I-S, his DNA was found under the fingernails of the decedent. And guess what? Anytime there's DNA in a case, you tell your client, you're almost certainly going to get convicted. That is the power of DNA evidence. And so our lawyer went to visit Mr. Anderson in jail, and he was a chronic alcoholic with a pretty bad story. He hung out at the 7-Eleven on 10th Street down the way pretty regularly and was routinely taken to the hospital for being 3 or 4 times the legal limit for driving. So very bad alcoholic. So he said, I don't know. And one time he had hit his head when he was drunk, and so his memory wasn't very good. So he said, I don't know. His lawyer's name was Kelly Kulik. He said, I don't know, Kelly. It doesn't seem like something I would do. I don't remember anything. And I was pretty much drunk all the time. So as part of as part of the development of the case, because it was death penalty eligible, our investigators and our paralegals did a lot of work to dig out his background, his mitigation, his medical records, his mental health records, his school records, all of it. And the investigator came into Kelly one day and said, oh my God, you've got to read these records right now. So it turned out that he passed out in a store. Paramedics were called. They knew him. They knew his date of birth. They dealt with him all the time. They picked him up, probably put one of those things on his finger to see if he had a pulse and what his blood pressure was, took him to VMC, and then they were called out to the scene in Monte Sereno where they, again, put the thing on the finger of the decedent to see if there had been a pulse. And that's how the DNA got transferred from Mr. Anderson, who I'll show you in a minute, to the decedent. And that's how, through really intense investigation, we were able to show that Mr. Anderson, seen here, out of custody now, had nothing to do with this murder. And so the case was presented to the prosecution. They understood that he had an airtight alibi, that there were medical records, and the timing wasn't right. He was clearly at VMC all night. But if he hadn't had a public defender, he would be in state prison right now, maybe looking at the death penalty. And that happens in other jurisdictions in the South all the time. And so that's the reason why you have to keep public defender offices strong and resourced comparatively to the prosecution. And it was a milestone case, and thank goodness Kelly was able to handle it the way she did. So I want to talk just briefly about public safety. Most people don't think of the public defender when they think of public safety, but I would invite you to think about us when you think about public safety, and here's why. Because we are uniquely situated in dealing with clients with acute needs as their lawyer and as part of their defense team to, as I mentioned, holistically address those needs, get them out of the system, get them the help they need, and thereby make the public safer. So please do think of us when you're thinking about public safety, and that again goes back to the resourcing. just briefly before I hand over the mic to Damon, I just want to talk about some things we have on the horizon. Right now, we can't do early representation with every single one of our clients. We would love to be able to do that. We probably need 5 more lawyers in order to do it. So that's a goal, to scale up our representation. We are starting a mental health court wellness pilot with Kelly Kulik, Lucas Anderson's lawyer, who's now on the bench and is a Superior Court judge. So she's doing that mental health court. We really need more resources to explore retroactive Racial Justice Act cases. And finally, Care Court, which is a state piece of legislation that is designed to get some mentally ill and homeless people off the street with some voluntary treatment. So we'll be involved in that at its rollout in December. And that's all I have for you.